Hello, BariAftercare friends, and welcome to today's episode of BariAftercare, the podcast. And I'm smiling because I just heard the most heartwarming story. I'm not going to tell you about it, but it was just a beautiful story. And hopefully, tonight's talk will warm your heart a little bit. The topic is the connection between your relationship with yourself and your relationship with food. And as I thought about this topic, I thought, a lot of what comes to my mind when I think about your relationship with yourself feels very redundant. And I know I speak about this a lot, but it's a topic that is one of the most near and dear to my heart. And it's one of the topics that I most want people in the world to understand is critical, the relationship that you have with yourself. Now, the connection between the relationship with yourself and food and your relationship with anything else flows from the relationship you have with yourself. And I know that some of what I'm going to say tonight, you may have heard. Some of it you may hear in a different way. And usually when I do the podcast, I do quite a bit of reading and I look up some research and I, check things out. I want to make sure I've got the right statistics. I don't want to propagate, inaccurate information. But I kept thinking, this is a topic of my heart. I don't need notes. I don't want notes. I made some notes. I may or may not use those notes. But when I thought about sitting down to do this, I thought, I've got to talk from my heart on this topic because the relationship with self is honestly the core, the backbone, the roots of where BariAftercare, the program, originated. And the relationship with self is something that I always kind of poo-pooed and yeah, whatever. Because for many years of my life, that was the podcast I was listening to with that nice story. I just was turning it away from me and I accidentally turned it on. Sorry about that noise. The relationship with myself was not something as a young woman, I'm talking under 30, that I really wanted to explore. What I wanted to do more than anything was stay away from myself. Part of that was because I had struggled with obsessive compulsive disorder at different times growing up. And as a child, I was very, very alone with it. It wasn't one of the things that people knew a lot about. And even in college, I didn't talk to anybody about it. It wasn't until I was in my mid to late 30s that I even started talking about it and really learning about it myself. But I had it, didn't know what it was, but I didn't want to spend time with myself because I was afraid of where my mind would go. So my obsessive compulsive disorder was not in the form of washing my hands, or it was behavioral early in my life, like turning on and off light switches or walking up and down the same stair, and it was miserable. But as I got older, it became an internalized thing, and it was terrifying thoughts. It was just intrusive, terrifying thoughts that I couldn't stop. So being alone with myself was not something I relished doing. So I stayed very, very busy. I stayed away from myself and my life as much as possible, so I didn't really know anything about the kind of relationship that I had with myself. Now, 40 years later, looking back on that, when I look at my actions, when I look at my behavior, excuse me, I can tell you that I clearly did not have the healthiest relationship with myself. Other people can often see the kind of relationship we have with ourselves more clearly than we can see it our own self. Because who wants to say, and some of us do say this, I don't like myself. I don't like who I am. I don't like anything about myself. Some of us say that, but I don't even think it's true. I don't think that we don't like anything about ourselves. We may not like our weight. We may not like our hair color. We may not like a feature of our bodies. We may not like, where our strengths and weaknesses lie. I don't like my quick temper. I don't like, certain things about me. But did I like myself? Well, I certainly didn't reflect on that in any way, shape, or form until later on in life. Now, there were moments along the way. I can think of some times when there's a place that, when people say, imagine your safe place or your peaceful place. And I don't know if you have a place that comes to mind, but I clearly have a place. And it was a place that, well, a couple things happened there. One, one was I worked at this convent. I grew up in a very Catholic city. And at the age of 14, I got a job and I worked in the infirmary of this convent. It was a huge convent. I don't know all what went on there. There are a lot of buildings and whatever, but I just worked in their little hospital or their little infirmary. And these were all retired nuns from around the country. And the women that I worked with, but were the nuns that were retired there, were all ill. So some of them were bedbound, some of them, we walked with them or just took care of them. I mean, talk about doing some illegal things that would be illegal today. At 14 years of age, I was passing out medicines. That's not wise in any way, shape, or form, right? They would give us a tray and Sister So-and-so's medicine to be here, and we'd go down the, the hallway and we'd give her those Oh my goodness, when I think about that, 14. And I was bathing these women and walking with them and changing their clothes, changing their diapers. I mean, it was a nurse's aide position for sure. And you'd think at 14 that would be a horrifying thing. It wasn't. I loved that job and I loved those nuns because they gave me something I didn't get a lot of, and that was individual attention. I had 5 siblings. There were 6 kids in our house, 5 girls. I mean, there was a lot going on. So these ladies, they just loved us young girls. And so we would sit and talk to them and laugh and just have a really good time. And it was a really good time of my life. But it sat on this amazingly gorgeous grounds. And it overlooked the Mississippi River. And there were times at my lunch break or whatever that I would just want to go outside. And so I would go outside, I would sit on the grass, and I would just look over that scenery. And I can picture it so clearly in my mind. And I had a good friend of mine give me a photograph that she took. She's a photographer and an artist. And she gave it to me this past year in 2024, which was last year. And it sits now right next to my vision board, right in front of me on my desk so that I can see that, because that was one of the very few places in my younger years that I would sit and reflect on, who am I and, where do I fit in the world and what's my life about and, all the existential things to the extent that you can really go deep as a teenager. But the other thing that I really loved about that place is my high school boyfriend and I, that's where we would go make out. Not do it. No. Just smoochy smoochy. Overlooking the Mississippi River. So anyway, at night when it was dark. Anyhow, that place has a lot of joy for me. But as I got older and things in my home life got more and more intense, parents were separating, then they got back together, and then they were going through a divorce. My sister went off to college, and then I was getting ready to go off to college, and 4 younger siblings that I was worried about. My father was an alcoholic. My mother was losing her mind and acting like a teenager, and things were pretty chaotic. And so I had a lot of stress. So the last thing I ever wanted to do was stop and think about what was going on in my family, how I felt, leaving home. I was excited but terrified, all of the things. So I didn't really explore this idea of having a relationship with myself until many years later. And I went through college. I drank, 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 drank. Did I say I drank? I drank through college. I numbed myself, but the drinking didn't come until after the anorexia. So I numbed myself, did not have a thought in the world other than what do I weigh? How many calories have I consumed? How far have I walked? It was just stay away from myself, stay away from the reality of what was going on around me. Not a clue about how to cope with emotions or feelings. So I didn't. I stayed numb. And then the drinking, 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 and the boys, the boys, the boys, the boys, the boys, the inappropriate behavior in that regard. I just stayed numb through all the ways that we can keep ourselves numb. Not all the ways, but some of those ways. So then I got married. And life went from 100 miles an hour. I was managing a bar, of course. I was managing a bar full time, going to school full time. I graduated, got married, moved to a dinky little town, and it was like somebody put on the brakes so hard, so hard. And immediately we had a baby. And the OCD just went crazy because now I had time alone. I had time to think. My husband traveled 2 weeks out of the month. I was in this dinky little town, didn't know a soul. And that relationship with self threatened me. I was alone. I was scared. I didn't know what to do with a baby. I didn't know what to do with myself. I had no relationship with myself, no healthy relationship with myself. And most people who would look at my life externally, if they had any depth to themselves, they would see a young girl who clearly did not love herself. My actions displayed a person who didn't love themselves. I drank. Nothing wrong with drinking if you don't have a drinking problem. I drank to the point of blacking out 5 nights a week. That's not healthy. That's abusing my body. I starved myself. I didn't eat. I ate the bare minimum to stay alive. I was abusing my body. I was not nourishing it. I was not nurturing it. I was not taking care of it. I was smoking cigarettes. A lot of people smoke, but I'm telling you something. It's a sign that I don't care that much about myself because smoking kills people. Excessive amounts of alcohol kill people. Starvation kills people. So if you looked carefully at my life, which nobody did, you could see a person who was not valuing herself. And then you hear these things throughout life, like, you can't love anybody else until you love yourself. And I was like, gag, 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 just gag me. Because I thought, I love my husband. I love my friends. I love my siblings. I loved my baby. True. Like many things, it's not an all or nothing thing. I knew that my life had value because I believe, and I've always believed, that we all have some intrinsic value. We were not created for no reason. We were created for a purpose or several purposes, whether it's friendship or whatever. I don't think any of us were created willy-nilly for no reason. So I knew that all human beings had intrinsic value, and I was taught that in my family, and I was taught that in my church, and so I knew I had some value, but I was not showing my self-value. Before I got married, before I met my husband, I was dating a guy, super controlling. And as controlling guys are and controlling relationships, unfold over time, he was picking me up from work, taking me to work, taking me to campus, picking me up from campus. I couldn't do anything without him having control over where I was. And you don't need to wear makeup. You don't need to do this. You can, there's no reason for you to do that. Super controlling. Somebody who likes themselves, who values themselves, who has a sense of worth, doesn't put up with that for very long. And fortunately, when it came to the point where one night there was a physical involvement, that was it. That was it. I knew I was not staying for that. So many things between the time of my mid-teens until my late 20s demonstrated to anybody watching me that I was engaging in self-abusive behavior. After I got married, I wasn't drinking very often because my husband wasn't a drinker. I had an infant. I was home alone. I was going to drink with my baby, thank God. So I had some sense of, I'm not going to hurt other people. But I started smoking again after I had the baby. When I did drink, which was rare, I would drink more. And I started taking prescription pain medication. The point of all of that is a couple of things. That is behavior of someone who doesn't feel real good about themselves. Because let's just face it, people who understand that they have value, people who have a healthy relationship with themselves, don't do that. They don't abuse or allow themselves to be abused continually. So there are people who might start dating somebody and they're like, no, that isn't going to work for me. I didn't value myself. I didn't have a healthy relationship with myself. And I always, like I said, I kind of dismissed that business of you can't love anybody else unless you love yourself, because I didn't want to look at the truth of that statement. I didn't want to look at the fact that I didn't love myself. Now, most people who didn't take too close of a look and didn't see all that going on with me would say, that girl's got it together. Wow, she's really got it together. She's got a college degree. She worked full-time in college. She worked while she was in high school. From the time she was 4, what a responsible young woman. Oh my gosh, and look at that husband. Oh, she's got a husband who has a good job, and look at those precious little babies. And they are, and they were. Look, that girl has got it together. I looked on the outside like I had it together, just like my family did. We lived on the right street. We didn't have a lot of money, but nobody did. We went to the right school. My dad had a nice job, didn't make a lot of money. We had 6 kids. It wasn't about money. It was just about looking good on the outside. Things were not good on the inside. And that led to or contributed to, I'm not blaming that, but all of those things, plus a combination of obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety and depression, again, somewhat as a result of the circumstances, led to a young woman who had no clue about herself. Really, not very much of a clue at all. And remember, a couple of episodes ago, we talked about what a healthy relationship is. And this was in context of 2 people in a relationship. But I'm going to use those same criteria, and we're going to talk about it. And what I want you to do is think about you and think about what areas of yourself do you like? What things about yourself don't you like? And where's the balance? Overall, do you kind of like, respect? We're going to talk about these criteria. Or on the balance, do you not have so much of these characteristics? Either way doesn't make you a bad person. I was not a bad person then. I did some very unhealthy things, very unhealthy things at that time. But it didn't make me a bad human being. I didn't intentionally hurt people. Yes, I did hurt people. And I have since made amends to those people. But there was no sense of self-relationship. And maybe you still don't have that in your life. Maybe you do. But let's talk about this a little bit. So the characteristics of a healthy relationship with another person, with food, with yourself, we talked about this in the last episode or two. Respect. The behaviors I was engaging in, the excessive alcohol consumption, the cigarette smoking, the sleeping around as a young 20, the starvation of my body for a few years, those were not respectful of my physical body or of my mental health or of my spiritual self. Not respectful behavior. So I lacked respect for myself by not caring for myself. Trust. Did I trust myself? Heck no. Did I trust myself to have a drink and stop? No. Did I trust myself to not go home and sleep with a boy if he told me I was pretty? No. It wasn't that bad. I did not do the one night stand thing, but I did have a lot of boyfriends. And I did sleep with too many of them. I didn't trust myself. I didn't respect myself enough to say, I don't need to have sex with you for you to like me. That's how I thought I would be accepted or approved of or liked or feel pretty or feel desired. Because clearly I didn't feel those things. Was I honest with myself? Not at all. I couldn't be. I could not be honest with myself. It's a self-preservation thing. I could not be honest about the fact that, you know what, I'm acting a little slutty and that's not very self-respectful. I drink way too much. Who's going to say that? Yeah, the smoking, it's really, it's been proven to kill people, but hey, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I'm fine. The denial, the self-protection. When we're engaging in behavior that is protective, we cannot be honest with ourselves because then we'd have to go to that place we don't want to go to, which is inward reflection. That's a scary place, especially at that age, without any tools to go there. Did I set boundaries? Clearly not. I just told you about my life as a late teen slut. No boundaries there. Very lacking self-respect. Did I have, these are all qualities of a healthy relationship, by the way. The respect, the trust, the honesty, the ability to set boundaries, the ability to express my needs. Not a chance. I wasn't, first of all, if you've read Mel Robbins' book, I loved this part, the book called Let Them. She talks about her therapist, and I love this part because I say this all the time. Most adults do not have the ability, the emotional adultness to deal with life, to deal with stress, to deal with problems, to deal with healthy communication, to deal with setting boundaries, to deal with, because we were never taught. So part of it, my favorite word is we were ill-equipped. I was absolutely ill-equipped because I hadn't been taught those things, nor did I have them modeled very well. So I was very ill-equipped. So I was surviving, and I was distancing myself from me. That's what was happening. So if you go by the criteria of a healthy relationship, I certainly did not have that. So when I went to treatment at the age of 29, they start to peel away those layers. You know, they talk about therapy as peeling away the layers of an onion. And on the very, very inside of that onion, and if you've taken my class Gain While You Lose, I have this picture of an onion, and I don't think it's photoshopped, but there's a little piece on the middle of this onion, which is sliced open, that looks like a heart. And then it's got all these layers around it. Well, that very inner self is the part of me that I did know was there, that I knew had value, that I knew that had intrinsic value. So there was a teeny tiny piece of me tucked away somewhere that knew that there was value and that I had worth, buried under all these protective layers. Protection from the anxiety I felt, protection from the OCD, protection from the thoughts of the stress going on around me, protection from wanting to control things I could not control, protection from my feelings of insecurity. And so when I went to treatment, very slowly, they start to peel away those levels of protection. People who have weight loss surgery have some of their protective layers, i.e. weight, i.e. food, taken away in an instant when they have surgery. And they're left so emotionally raw that it can be terrifying. In treatment, which was a 6-week period, followed by, again, this is why I do what I do with BariAftercare, followed by an extensive year of aftercare. And when I say an extensive year of aftercare, I meant weekly group therapy sessions for a year, because we've taken away the cigarettes, we've taken away the alcohol, we've taken away the pain pills, we've taken away my unhealthy coping mechanisms. And so what do I have? Terror. How do I live? Oh my God, you want me to look at myself and you want me to talk about people I've hurt and things I've done and ways I've hurt myself and ways I've been disrespectful to myself and to other people? Oh my God, what am I going to do with all these emotions? The guilt, the shame, the pain, the anger, the sadness. What am I going to do with all of that? That's why we have aftercare. That's why alcohol centers and drug centers have always had aftercare programs, because they know we're stripping people away from their coping skills, and we need to teach them the things you need to be taught. A, to let go of the things that you've done that you know have been bad for yourself and other people, to deal with the shame, the hurt, the pain, the sadness, the fear, the anger, and to develop the skills to cope with those things and to talk about your relationship with yourself and to come to terms with the reality that I did not ever want to face until my relationship with myself is better. Not perfect, not healed permanently, but until I start to see and value my worth and treat my mind, my body, and my spirit with respect, with dignity, with honesty. Learn to set boundaries, learning coping skills, learning to say, that doesn't work for me. Learning who I am and what I value. And then prioritizing those values. I've called them meaningful matters. What matters to you? What is meaningful? This is what matters to me, and this is what matters to me, and what matters to me may be different than what matters to you. But whatever those things are, it's about working toward them And I'm going to share some examples with you about how that has progressed for me over time. Some really pivotal things that have happened to help me learn to like myself, learn to respect myself, learn to value myself. So am I going to say, ooh, I love myself? You know, I love the young and the restless. I love yoga. The kind of love for self isn't about I get great joy from it necessarily, but I respect my body. I respect my mind. I respect my spirit. Do you know what that looks like? It looks like exercise on a regular basis, because this body's going to carry me till whenever I leave this earth. And I would like to prolong that with good health for as long as I possibly can. And the only way to do that scientifically is to treat it well. So a value to me is to be healthy and live as long as I can as a healthy human being, because I value the people I love and the time I spend with them and the activities that I do in life. So I have to act like I value me, and I have to behave and treat others like I value them. And I'll tell you something that I have learned, that my treatment toward others is absolutely interrelated to how I feel about me. When I snap at somebody, when I'm rude, when I'm impatient, when I'm whatever, I'm aware that I hurt other people and I don't like that. But I'll tell you what I don't like more than that is how I feel about myself. That is not who I want to be. And that is a question that I ask myself constantly. Sometimes while I'm being rude to somebody else, is this who I want to be? And the other thing that I have learned that helps me with my relationship with self, because I'm never going to do this perfectly, and because almost on a daily basis, I'm going to snap at somebody or say something that's, going to hurt them. I have learned through my aftercare program many, many years ago, and by staying very focused on this healthy way of life, to go and make amends on a daily basis, because that clears the gunk from building up in me. And by the time I went to treatment, I was so filled with gunk that I was angry about, that I was ashamed of, that I was terrified about, that I was sad about, that I was confused about, that I didn't know how to deal with. And in treatment and aftercare and years and years and years and years of therapy, I have learned to treat myself like a person I like. Now, can we love other people when we don't love ourselves? Yes. Will we love them better when we love ourselves and value ourselves and respect ourselves and set boundaries for ourselves and with others? And when we're honest with ourselves and when we're honest with others? When we invest in personal growth and we learn about what we're doing? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the more I learn the skills and the tools, and the more I follow my values, and the more I behave in line with my values, I feel better about myself, and consequently my interactions with others are better. Not a question, that's an absolute. When I feel good about myself, when I am behaving in a way that's alignment with my soul, with my values, for my health, for my mind, for my body, for my relationships, when I behave in ways that are in alignment with that, and when I make amends, when I interrupt the goodness, my relationships with others are better. When you get on the scale and you don't like it, are you crabby? Probably. Do you take that out on other people? You may not think you do, but I'll bet they can feel it and sense it. When you give in to a food binge and you're feeling miserable about yourself and you're angry with yourself and you're sad and you went against your own values, are you your best self around your loved ones, around your coworkers, around anybody? Probably not. That is why we have to start with ourselves. Now, we can do this multi-pronged too, right? I want to change my behavior with my mouth. I want to talk softer. I want to talk more kindly. I want to be more patient. I want to be more compassionate, while at the same time work on my inner self. So we can change our external behavior while we're also changing our internal behavior. I had a conversation with a woman today, and I've had this same conversation with my own therapist and with many a client over the years. But why? Why do I do this? I have to know why before I can change. Yes and no. And the reason I say yes and no is I believe that as we learn to deal with our emotions related to stuff that's happened in our lives, it helps us to be more honest and leads to all the better things, for sure. But I can also change behavior while I'm doing this work. So you don't need to know why you go through the drive-thru to not go through the drive-thru. You don't need to know why you pick up the package of cookies at the store to not pick up the package of cookies at the store. I like the interaction between self-discovery, self-exploration, insight, internal knowledge. I think it's critical. And working through the emotions associated with those things and changing your behavior at the same time, which is what life is about. I didn't get to stop living for 40 years because I needed to figure myself out after treatment. I still had 3 young children. I still had a marriage to put back together. I still had friendships that I had damaged. And I had to work through all of this emotional stuff at the same time. So yeah, you got to learn to eat the protein first. You got to learn to drink the water all day long and sip it. You got to learn to, get all the protein in. You got to learn to make time for exercise while you're dealing with all this other stuff. That's life. That's called being an adult, multitasking. Put your phone down and do some individual work, just like you are now listening to this. Okay, so self-love or liking yourself is appreciation for who you are. So hopefully you're able to say, you know what, I appreciate that I spend a lot of time with my children, or I appreciate that I'm a really good worker, and I appreciate that I have a lot of compassion for people. Please do that. Because again, we're so all or nothing at times, and we can be that way with ourselves too, and we are not all or nothing. There are things I like about myself and things I like to keep working on. There are things I like about myself, and there are things I really don't. Like I said, my temper is probably my biggest problem. I get hot like that. Now, most of the time, I cool off really quickly too, but in that window of time, you don't want to be around me. And I have learned to tell my husband, it probably would be better if you just wait out in the other room for a few minutes. Because I know I have to pound my feet or scream at nobody. But if he's in the vicinity, he's a target. And I don't want him to be a target of my shortcoming. I don't like that about myself. Have I made huge strides? Yes, I have. But is it still there? Yes, it is. So some of these things may never go away, but it's how we deal with them. But do you appreciate yourself? Intellectually? Do you appreciate your spirituality, whatever that means to you? And do you tend to it? I can plant a garden and never tend to it, and all I'm going to get is weeds, right? Do you tend to your physical health? Surgery is not going to fix your physical health. It'll improve your physical health and conditions for sure, right? But it isn't going to fix whether or not you continue to work toward it by developing these habits. medications for weight loss. I have this guy that I work with. Oh my God. Oh, I love this. He did not want to have surgery, barely qualified to begin with, but he started taking one of the GLP-1s. And not only did he start taking the medicine, he started in therapy on a very regular basis with me. He stopped drinking every single night. He started going to bed much, much earlier and getting the rest he needs. The dude is now running. He just did his first, I don't know, 10K or I don't know what it was. And now he's going to do the Peachtree, which is a huge race in the Atlanta area. He's doing all the things. So the surgery or the medicine or taking alcohol away or taking the pills away or taking the shopping away or taking the credit cards away or taking the whatever way is not going to do it. It's the work you do on the mind, the body, the spirit. It's the developing the relationship with yourself. And everything we do is based on the value we believe we have. If I don't believe I have value, I'm not going to exercise my body. If I don't believe I have great worth, if I don't like myself enough, I'm not going to treat myself well. I don't care what I eat. Our behavior says a lot about how we feel about ourselves. And you don't probably want to, like I didn't want to say that. Yeah, I feel pretty worthless. But everything I was doing to myself demonstrated that. And that is a hard thing to come to terms with. The good news is, just like I have, and millions, people you know have turned themselves around. People who have had severe trauma in their lives, which of course is going to damage how you feel about yourself, no doubt. People who have been bullied, which damages how you feel about yourself. People who have been physically, sexually abused or neglected or abandoned by parents and feel that and bring that childhood woundedness into their adult lives can heal and do heal and have healed, and you can too. But you got to do the work. This is not easy. And having surgery, but staying focused on the scale and staying focused on diet mentality and staying focused. Yes, you have to eat healthy. And yes, you have to pay attention to those things. I'm not talking about being consistent. I'm talking about being obsessed with the scale, being obsessed with a diet, being obsessed with the weight, being obsessed. That is not changing. That is doing what you did before the surgery, which is not looking at yourself. That is what BariAftercare is about. That's why I do these podcasts, because you are a person. You are more than your weight. You are more than the size of clothing you wear. You are more than the calories you consume. You are more than the instruments you can play or can't play, the languages you can speak or can't speak, the people. You have value because you are. And until you are willing to acknowledge that and start treating yourself as such, things are going to get a lot better in your life. You're likely to switch to a different unhealthy coping skill or return to the one that maybe you have been leaving behind. The way we feel about ourselves is expressed through our self-talk, whether it's out loud or in our heads. And I know from 20 years in the bariatric community that a lot of people have horrible conversations, speak horrible words to themselves. Maybe they're words they heard as children about them. But you're not a child anymore. You do not have to continue abusing yourself like you were abused as a child. You do not have to continue to act out fear or loneliness or in uncertainty. You do not have to live with, I don't have the skills, because they are available to you. They're available to me. They are available to you. And you can too. You can go find them. You can utilize them. You can engage in them. They are available to you. But when you talk to yourself critically, I mean, we all do it sometimes. It's not, do you do this once or twice a week? Do you negatively talk to yourself throughout the day? Most days, in a critical way. That's not loving yourself. It's not respecting yourself. It's not trusting yourself. It's not setting boundaries with yourself. It's not setting boundaries for yourself with other people. Here are some day-to-day ways that we demonstrate a lack of self-love. We do everything for everybody else. When you don't set boundaries and say no, I don't care if it's with your mother, your father, your sister, your brother, your boss, your child, your spouse, or yourself. It is not an act of self-love. Boundaries are an act of self-love. Boundaries say, I matter too. I will take care of myself by saying no to doing this or that for you and them and everybody else. Not all the time. It's not about being unhealthy selfish. It's about being healthy selfish. Healthy selfish means sometimes I'm going to take care of me. Sometimes I'm going to say no. Taking care of ourselves means understanding we can't fix other people. We can't stop their pain. We can't make them do what we want. We can't make them stop drinking or stop eating or stop gambling or stop. We can share our thoughts. We can honestly share our opinions. We can share our feelings, and then we got to let it go. Self-love means this is an area that I still have work to do, right? The social comparisons. I look at the women my age and go, they're stronger than I am. They're fitter than I am. And I work on it. I work on it. Now when I go to a yoga class, I rarely even notice the people around me because I am there for my yoga. I am there for my time. It's just such a great way for me to connect to me and be fully present in the moment because you got to pay attention to what's going on. Comparison, putting yourself negative, or putting yourself as a superior. Both are signs of not feeling okay about yourself. Because if I'm superior, then I'm judging. That's not cool. And if I'm like, oh, they're all better than me, they're all whatever than me, richer, smarter, thinner. You heard about Demi Moore's speech at the Golden Globes, and I loved this. I loved this. Somebody told her, she said she was feeling kind of down about herself, didn't know if, and somebody told her she needed to put down the measuring stick if she was ever going to feel okay about herself. Put down the measuring stick. Don't compare yourself to other people. Don't compare your worth to the number on the scale. Quit. We need to quit putting our value on something that has nothing to do with who we are. Do we respect ourselves? Do we trust ourselves? Do we treat ourselves well? Do we say kind things to ourselves? And do we do this with other people? That's what self-love is about. Self-love is about saying, you know what, I'm really good at this. I'm good at public speaking. You know what I'm not good at? Playing the piano. I'm good at interacting with strangers. You know what I'm not good at? I'm not good at numbers. Right? So self-love, you don't have to be good at everything. You don't have to let everybody know how good you are at anything. That's not self-love. That's saying, I don't feel good about myself, so I'm going to brag to everybody about how good I feel. Like another way we give ourselves away. Selfishness is not self-love. There's healthy selfish and there's unhealthy selfish. Unhealthy selfish is, I'm just going to, we say it's my year, which is okay, right? Most people say, this is my time. They don't mean to the exclusion of everybody else, but the people who get out of my way, it's all about me, that's unhealthy selfish. Healthy selfish is I'm taking my time away from my family to go for a walk. I'm taking the time away from everybody to go do some meditation. I'm taking time away from everybody to go do some journaling, to go to therapy, to sit quietly with nothing and nobody around. That's healthy selfish. There's a difference. Accepting ourselves. I've never liked my right thigh. It's always been bigger than my left thigh. The older I get, the easier it is to have acceptance about my body because I work at it, but I'm not obsessed about having the body of a 40-year-old because it ain't going to happen. So acceptance that, I'll tell you another thing, I have huge ears. It used to drive me crazy. My husband would say, God, your ears are so big. It's like one time he's like, I'm going to go get a ruler and measure those things. I'm like, no, you're not. And I felt very ashamed and embarrassed about my ears. Who cares? I do have big ears. My mother had ginormous ears. Who cares? I'll bet you never even thought about it. You might look at them now. They're pretty darn big. I support myself. I support myself in taking time for myself. I support myself in taking time for the things that are important to me, that are in my best interest. I put positivity into my brain and my body. We were talking about, the family was together. They were talking about things like what the best TV shows, the best 100 TV shows of the last decade or whatever. I'm like, my God, they're all about violence and killing people and destruction. I'm like, garbage in, garbage out. Ugh. I mean, you may have a passion for one of those things, but if it's all the time, I don't know, that's not positivity to me. A balance. A balance. I watch a trashy soap opera. That's not probably the best thing for me. But I don't watch it all day long and I don't watch 12 of them. I watch one episode every, I don't know, I'm 5 months behind if that tells you anything. Most of what I put in is podcasts that are healthy and good for my brain and my body. And I read things that are nurturing to my brain and my body. And I eat mostly healthy foods. And I exercise most of the time. I'm not out there pumping iron 5 days a week, but I am moving my body. It's not about perfection or impressing anybody else or doing what somebody else thinks I need to do. It's about caring for myself. Caring for myself, being thoughtful toward yourself. And you've heard it a billion times. Would you say that to your best friend? Would you treat anybody else like that? Well, sometimes we do actually treat other people as badly as we treat ourselves. Think about how you treat your spouse sometimes. Think about how you treat your kids sometimes. It's not always that great, really. So we might want to work on treating ourselves and others better. But we're not going to treat others better if we don't start treating ourselves better and if we don't feel better about ourselves. If you don't set boundaries for yourself, you're not respecting yourself. If you don't set boundaries with yourself by saying no to yourself sometimes, you're not respecting yourself. So why is this important? And what does this have to do with anything? Because clearly, without valuing ourselves and looking at those characteristics of what a healthy relationship is and applying them to self and doing whatever work it takes to improve on those things, you're not going to have the healthiest relationships you can have with other people. It just doesn't work that way. And a little tidbit, your level of emotional health is about the same as the people you hang out with. It's definitely around the same level. I always talk about full cup, right? If my bottle of water is half empty, and that demonstrates where I'm at in terms of my emotional health, then my partner's going to be about the same level. We can have that debate another day, but it's the truth. So sometimes people think, you know, I'm so much superior to my spouse in terms of my emotional health. No, you're not. If you're married to this person, you guys are at about the same level of emotional health. It can look very, very different, but I would bet pretty much anything on that. I'm sure there are exceptions to the rules. There always are. But here are some ways to tell you may not have such a great relationship with yourself. If you engage in perfectionism, perfectionism is not about reality or a a healthy relationship with self, because it's impossibly high standards. It's trying to prove something to yourself because you don't feel so good about yourself. The self-criticism, the self-loathing, the negative self-talk absolutely is a clue about your level of self-love. Fear of judgment, we all have some of that. You know, it's not, again, it's not an all or nothing thing. We all fear judgment. But if you don't engage in life, or if you need constant external validation, I was talking with a young man recently, actually, who was describing past history of relationships and needing that constant reassurance. Are you thinking about me? Why aren't you texting me? Why aren't you texting me back? That constant reassurance. It's an absolute sign of a lack of self-love, because if you have that sense of security, you don't need a constant influx of validation from other people. And so what you want to work toward is self-acceptance of your strengths and of your weaknesses. You want to work towards self-compassion, giving yourself a break like you would give somebody else a break. You want to work toward positive self-talk. You absolutely want to work towards self-awareness, because if you're not aware of something, you can't change it. And that may mean getting a little more honest with yourself, and that can be painful, which is why you probably need to have a therapist or a coach. Self-care practices, which are the behavioral gotta-do-ums. But I'm telling you, the emotional gotta-do-ums are just as important when we get away from our unhealthy coping skills. Because we are either ill-equipped, meaning we never learned them and we haven't been taught them, so how can we know how to implement them? Or we have so much baggage from trauma or neglect or abuse that we have to work through that first. Not everybody has had a history of trauma. Most people have had some people have had a lot. But most of us, trauma, neglect, or not, haven't been taught the skills that we need. People have modeled to us negative behaviors and haven't taught us the skills for developing a healthy relationship with ourselves. So some of the things that you can do are notice how you feel, notice how you're thinking, and then work to change it. Having gratitude is an amazing way to get rid of negativity. Yesterday, I had a rough day. Some of it was self-induced, some of it was environmental. And that quick temper of mine, I mean, it passed, but there were a series of things, and I was in a tizzy, and I got myself more in a tizzy. And then I fell to, like a person who gives into a bunch of food, I fell to the guilt. Because I'm like, really? Why do I have to be like that? I didn't hurt anybody else in the process with my mouth or my attitude, because there was really nobody around. And there were two people around, actually, and I was very, very kind to them. But I was in such an internal state and beating myself up, like, why am I like this? Why do I get so worked up? Blah, 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 blah. And then I thought to myself, you know what? I learned that. I've lived with it. Some of it is biological. Some of it is, we have traits. We have personality. That is pretty ingrained in me. What's different now is how I treat other people when I'm in that state and how quickly I come out of it. So I quit beating myself up and I said, listen, that was quite an internal storm. And yet the two people you encountered who were involved in the process, you were very kind to, you were polite with, you were patient with, you really modulated your voice. So I was proud of myself. So it's not about being perfect and thinking we're going to be these, we're not going to have issues. It's about what we do. It's about what we do and about being compassionate with ourselves for being human and for giving ourselves the kind of feedback that we would give to other people that we really are being kind to. But other examples of self-sabotaging behavior is absolutely a sign of not having the best relationship with yourself. It's the perfectionism, the procrastination, the undermining your own success, the losing the weight, and then every time gaining it back, the self-punishment, the self-recrimination, any kind of relationship sabotage or sabotage with unhealthy coping skills, any kind of self-harm. And let's face it, it doesn't just mean cutting. Overeating is self-harm. Starving yourself is self-harm. Putting yourself in a financial state that's not good is self-harm because your mental health suffers. So we have to address these things, these psychological gotta do'ems, in order to maintain the behavioral gotta do'ems. It's like if you don't have a relationship with yourself that you're working on, that's building and improving, then you're going to fall back to the negative behaviors that reflects a lot of how you feel about yourself. So that's kind of a bummer. But here's some things that you can do, right? You can practice, like I said, gratitude. You can set realistic goals, work away from that perfectionism. You can absolutely challenge yourself with your negative thoughts, with the way you're responding to yourself. You can absolutely learn to set boundaries with yourself and with other people. And you're probably, like I said, going to need to seek some professional support. But start checking in with yourself throughout the day. How do I feel? What's going on with me? What am I doing well in this hour? What have I done that maybe I need to look at? Are there people from this morning that I could maybe make an amends to? Or is there something I can give myself props for? Remember, you got to learn to say no. It's okay for that. It's okay to take time for yourself. You have value. Maybe journaling will help you, or talking to a good friend, or writing positive affirmations, or reaching out to a therapist. Use the 12 steps. BariAftercare is crammed, and I do mean crammed, with tools. It doesn't mean you're expected to use all of them and use them perfectly. It's crammed with tools because everybody is different. And things that resonate with you and are going to work for you may not with somebody else. So pick and choose what works best for you out of the many, many, many tools provided for you in BariAftercare. In BariAftercare, we can't do therapy individually with you. So seek a therapist, seek a bariatric coach, seek somebody to help you set goals. But for some of this lack of liking yourself or lack of demonstration that you like yourself, because you might want to say to yourself, yeah, of course I like myself. Of course I love myself. But you want to put yourself to the litmus test, which is as evidenced by what? Is your self-talk respectful? Is the way you treat your body respectful? Are you learning to trust yourself? Are you willing to make amends to other people? Are you willing to say, this is my part in this issue? This is what I did to make the situation worse. Are you willing to set boundaries with yourself? No, I'm not having that today. No, I'm not giving into TV. I'm going to go to Pilates. Are you willing to set boundaries with yourself? And are you willing to say in a relationship, this is what I would appreciate from you? They may or may not respond in a positive way or what you would like, but are you saying what you would like and appreciate in your relationships? Are you digging into self-growth? Are you learning and reading and learning what you may not have learned? That will tell the tale of how you feel about yourself. That is the evidence. That is the litmus test. And you may not be where you want to be today. Probably none of us are. And hopefully, you will make it a life mission for the rest of your life to improve the relationship with yourself. I have had some things in recent years, and I have been on this journey for about 34 of self-discovery and more self-honesty and accepting feedback from others and being kinder to myself and responding, all the self-love, the self-appreciation, the self-value kinds of things. And I have made vast improvements. I have a ways to go. It's a lifelong journey. It's not one and done. You're never there. But we can do better. And we can get further. I can, and you can too. So make the choice, learn the skills, learn the tools, bring the positive to you, and remember that we are talking about your life, your health, your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health. It's all your responsibility. So, my friends, share this podcast with everybody. This isn't necessarily about just your relationship with food, but I can guarantee you that your relationship with food will only improve as your relationship with yourself improves. Your relationship with alcohol, your relationship with gambling, your relationship with pornography, your relationship with any unhealthy coping skill will only improve as you learn the tools and learn to respect, trust, and care for yourself physically, spiritually, emotionally. All right, friends. Whew, that's a lot. One thing at a time. One thing at a time. Get off this podcast and tell yourself something that you like about yourself and list 10 things you're grateful for. Not kidding. Thank you for spending your time with me. Thank you for letting me just go from the heart today. And I appreciate you. Please appreciate yourself. Good night.